need to take a break? Should we take like a 5-minute break? You guys want to keep going? Okay, we're good to go. I don't want to take a break, but if you need to take a break, you totally can. There will be sushi served right after, not my class, but after Rabbi Farhi. Rabbi Farhi will be here soon. And I just wanted to thank the speakers that spoke before me. It's always difficult to get up and speak after both Rabbi Mizrahi and Rabbi Hajioff, as they are both inspirational, intellectual, prepared, and organized, way more so than I am. But what I want to share a little bit of a story that is not a long story, but it's a true story, and it's really just a reflection of today. And as I'm preparing and finishing up all my ideas for today's class, trying to figure out the best way to share this, I'm like struck with like different kinds of emotions. On the one hand, we're here because we're speaking about getting in the zone for Rosh Hashanah. We're talking about standing in front of the Almighty King, this omniscient, all-knowing God. So on the one hand, when I think about just that idea alone, this idea that I am standing before this infinite being, and I'm being evaluated very, 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 very clearly, very specifically, as someone who's looking with a magnifying glass at everything that I did throughout the whole entire year, that thought alone is terrifying. Because we all know that we could have been a little bit better. We all know in our heart of hearts that there's things that we should have strived for that we didn't. We know that we could have been kinder, we could have been softer, we could have been more giving and understanding and patient and loving and caring. We could have volunteered more. We should not have indulged so much in our... Oh, sorry about that. I need to do that still? Okay. Still got to wear mics. Testing? Okay. Indulge in just wasting my time. And the truth is that Rosh Hashanah is the day of reckoning. The day where we are being judged. On the one hand, we say who will live, who will die, who by fire, who by sword, who by water. These are terrifying ideas. This is terrifying imagery. So a part of me really wants to spend this time today to try to amplify that imagery as much as possible. Just scare everyone. Walk into Rosh Hashanah the way in which our ancestors walked into Rosh Hashanah, trembling with fear, walking around humbly, just being afraid, like you're going to the Knesset, just that awe that we're supposed to feel in these days of awe on Rosh Hashanah. But I also know that our generation, unfortunately, doesn't really have the ability of taking in that kind of musar, that kind of, rebuke in preparation for this day. So we could use this time to share, inspirational stories that will inspire you with the hope of you becoming a better, greater human being, or maybe just spend a lot of time just sharing jokes to inspire you that way, making it fun and light, or try to do a little bit of both, which is what I'm going to try to do today. Okay, I'm not funny. I don't have a sense of humor. If you know me well, I never really laugh, and everything I always present is very, very serious. And so I will do my best to present this information in a way that is somewhat meaningful, serious, and hopefully somewhat inspiring, but not funny at all. So here we go. Today I actually spoke. This is the first time I did this ever. I spoke for a group of hundreds of Edison employees. With the hope of trying to prepare them for Rosh Hashanah. They actually asked me to make a slideshow. They asked me to put together a slideshow of if I could explain Rosh Hashanah to a group of Jews and non-Jews in 45 minutes. What would you do? What would you say? Right? It was one of those kinds of things. So, this is my slideshow. If anyone wants to see it, I'm happy to share with you later. It's interesting. And parts of it I'm going to use for today. So how did this happen? How does a rabbi get invited to speak for Edison? I know I can't help you with your bills or anything like that. I don't know anything like that. So the story begins started 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I was running birthright trips, and there was a young woman who came on my trip, like so many others, and I get to meet every single person on my trip. I spend a lot of time getting to know the people, understanding who they are, their backgrounds, and so on and so forth. This was a wonderful young woman, very strong Jewish identity, very proactive on her campus and her Hillel public school, no real formal Jewish education at all, just a very deep pride of her Judaism. Her parents were from the former Soviet Union, but that's where their Judaism began and ended with their pride. So after spending 10 days with someone, you get to know them. And as I spent time with this beautiful young lady, it became clear to me that her mother was not Jewish. And a birthright, you can just get on a trip if your father's Jewish, if your mom's not Jewish. I met her father actually in the airport, sweetest guy in the world, a doll, nice Jewish star, pro-Israel, supports Israel, very pro-IDF, like amazing, everything is there, and raise a kid who's a gem. So unfortunately, sometimes I'm tasked with this very uncomfortable conversation where I tell a student in the most sensitive, meaningful way I possibly can, say, listen, I know that you identify as being Jewish. I know that that you're part of the Jewish people, and everything you do is amazing, and I'm not saying anything bad about that. I love all of that, but just be mindful that not everyone will accept you as a Jew through and through. And that if you ever consider, maybe you should consider, going through a process where we get rid of any safek, any doubt about your identity, maybe you consider going through what we call gerut chumrah, or any kind of gerut. This wasn't the chumrah, this is just like go through gerut, just go through conversion, so there's no doubts. So, the conversation I thought went really well. And I know that it went really well because she would come to my house every year, once a year, for our Shabbat dinner, for like 8 years. And I saw her once a year. She would just call me randomly out of nowhere. Could I come for a Shabbat dinner? And that was it. There was nothing else. No classes, nothing beyond just showing up. This was about 2019. It was like I'd say I guess 4 months before COVID. And she calls me up and she says, Rabbi, I'm getting married. I met this guy. I really want to meet him. I want you to meet him. I'm getting married. I really want you to officiate and meet him. This and that. And I said to her, listen, I would love to marry you. I would love to have you part of on my wall and count you part of another one bites the dust of the people that are locked away into marriage forever. But I can't officiate your wedding. I would love to. My home is open to you if you need anything. I help, but I can't do it. I'm an Orthodox rabbi, and we don't do that kind of stuff. So she says, well, what do I need to do? I'm like, you would just need to go through a conversion process. So she says, okay. I'll do it. I'm like, well, it's not enough for you to do it. Like if you're dating someone who's not observant, then I need him to go through a process of learning and growth also. Like it's great for you to do it, but if you're married to a guy who doesn't want to keep Shabbat or kosher, doesn't want you to go to the mikveh, then doesn't really help. Like you gotta have both of you. It's like it's a 2-for-1 kind of deal. So she agrees and says, you know what? Why don't we meet? I would just want you to meet him. I want you to get me your opinion and what you think about him. I say, fine, no problem. They come to my house. And I meet this guy, okay? This is like your classical Ashkenazi Russian, super intellectual, not inspirational at all, okay? Very serious. Everything is rational. Everything is a debate. You can't say something without him arguing and you defending your point. One of those kinds of guys. You know what I'm talking about? So I had this guy in my house, sweetheart of a guy, but, very stubborn. We'll call it that. So I said to them, listen, you both seem like an amazing couple. He seems like a great guy. I think you guys will make a great couple, but I'm not your rabbi. I can't really help over here. So he says to me, I didn't realize this was even an issue until she mentioned it. And now that I think about it, and having met with you, this is a 45-minute conversation, it's really important for me that she's actually Jewish and she's recognized by everybody, so that my children will be accepted as Jews by everyone. So I'm like, okay. So then, let's set you up. You'll take classes. You'll go through the whole process. You'll go through the conversion process, and you'll go through it with her. He says, 100% I'm in. I'm always curious to learn about Judaism. So excited. This will be amazing. Can't wait to learn. So they end up taking classes, and they make the condition. The caveat was that I would have to give them the classes. So I was committed to finding them a Beit Din. We use the Beit Din over here. And teaching them whatever they needed to learn to prepare for this amazing, awesome process. Now, typically speaking, whenever a rabbi does this, there's always a fear. Like, how do you know it's sincere? How do you know it's genuine? But this was a little different because she identified as being Jewish. She grew up her whole life as identifying as a Jew. She was very involved in everything Jewish on campus. So that was I had less of an issue with her. My major concern was going to be him, being the antagonist, right? Being the doubter. Right? Someone who would constantly throw a little pickle, at every little thing that she learned. If she was inspired, he'd crush it for her. So I said, I'll do this, but I'll try my best. And we spent months in preparation of this. Everything. I'm talking about everything from A to Z. Shabbat, Kashrut. I have a whole entire program. It's there. If anyone wants it, I'm happy to send you the PDF. If you want to go learn how to become a Jew, it's all there for you. So, we go through this process, and as time moves on, what I'm finding is that the antagonist, right, the guy who's giving me such a hard time, is like calling me up and saying, Rabbi, can you help me find a place where I could daven Shachrit in the morning? I'm like, what? You want to go to synagogue? He's like, yeah, I feel like we've learned about it. Like, I really want to try to actualize it. I'm like, all right, this is like more of like a scientific experiment for him, right? And then he says to me, well, Rabbi, well okay, fine. I've been going to Shachrit for the last couple of months. Like, where do I do the afternoon, the mincha service? And then it's where do I do the evening service, Arvit? And then how do I kasher my kitchen? And he's flying and he's eating it up. And what part of this process is that not only educating them, because ultimately, as much as you teach someone textually about being Jewish, if you don't have a family for you to sit down and learn with, you're not absorbing anything. So part of this was having them at my house once a month. I would have them at my house. They'd sleep at my house. They'd have Shabbat, all but their Shabbat meals with my family. This happened for almost 2.5 years in my house, every Shabbat, once a month. And it sometimes became daunting. The holidays, all the holidays. Where are they going to learn about all the holidays? So I came up with this amazing plan where I'd start farming them off to other people. So I live in an amazing community, and I started calling people, listen, I have this really great couple that would really benefit so much from having a relationship with you and your family. So do you mind hosting them? And I gave them the backstory, like, sure. And within a short period of time, within a few months, there were like 7 or 8 other families that were literally helping with the burden of hosting. It wasn't burdensome at all, God forbid. They were an amazing, beautiful couple. But just like sharing in that, like sharing of Judaism and life and so on and so forth. It's beautiful. So, I'm going to get there. It's, we're getting to the best part. So, we're going through this whole thing, and they're anxiously trying to go to the Beit Din to get tested to see whether or not they're qualified and ready for conversion. But unfortunately, all of the Beit Din were closed in New York because of COVID. Everything was shut down. So any process that was happening was halted, stopped. Nothing was happening. So they end up finally getting through the Beit Din. They're finally open. They're ready to do this whole entire thing. Lots of questions. How are you committed? What are you going to keep? Are you going to do all of it? Some of it? It was a very interesting, fascinating interview that happens. And they both passed the test with flying colors. The question that I often deal with, especially with a girl, is, Rabbi, like, do I really have to cover my hair? How much of this do I have to do? I'm like, listen, if you're doing this, then just go all the way. Like, what are you willing to do? So he's on the phone. She's like, listen, I don't know. Like, she doesn't feel comfortable wearing the tichel on her head, right? So I said, okay, well, what about getting her a wig? If she wants to wear a wig, let her wear a wig. She can wear a wig. So he says, no, she doesn't want one. She says, yeah. She says, yeah, I do want one, right? And it was just a fascinating conversation with two people, and watching them go through this process of truly discovering Judaism, Orthodox Judaism in its fullest, and their interest and commitment to it. So they finally go through the whole process. She goes to the mikvah. She gets 100. She's certified as a Jew 100%. There's no doubt about it. She chooses her name. 6 weeks later, they want to get married. 6 weeks later, they have a chuppah. And they get married, and they are amazing. Like, they're still coming for Shabbat, they're still learning, still growing, still amazing. And this guy happens to work for Edison, right? So he says to me, Rabbi, we work for Edison, and believe it or not, there is this like group of Jews in Edison that get together, and they always have a hard time finding someone who they can relate to. And I think you'd really be great at, you taught me so much. Can you come and share something for the high holidays for a group of people, Jews and non-Jews, and share a little bit about what Rosh Hashanah is? And make sure you explain to them why it's important. We're not going to be there for like Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot, and Simchat Torah, and everything else, so they don't think we're crazy. So interestingly, 50%, this is like there was 200 people, 100 people on this group were non-Jews who chose to sign up for a Rosh Hashanah class because they were curious to hear about what Rosh Hashanah is. Okay? So I gave them what I would say like the basics, but there was something more, much more profound and deep that I cannot share with them. That it's not just the day of judgment, the day where we celebrate time and the birth of man. There's something much more profound here. And the truth is, if you want to fully appreciate this, you have to go back to the source. What is the source for the holiday? We know it's a Torah holiday, it's not a rabbinic holiday. Right, what's the source of it? Now, it's interesting is you'll quote me the pasuk in Vayikra. It says, "B'chodesh hashvi'i be'echad chodesh yelechem Shabbaton zikron teruah mikre kodesh." That is the source. That in the seventh month, on the first of the month, you'll have a Shabbaton, right, a big party, a zikaron teruah, the remembrance of this thing called a teruah. Mikre kodesh is a day of holiness. This day of blasts. Well, that's what Rosh Hashanah is. Well, how does that translate into 48 hours of in the synagogue praying shofrot? We know where that comes from, right over here. Malchiot, zichronot. Where does all of that come from here? How do we see that in here? And what's interesting, Rashi tells us, our best friend, he says zikron truah, zikron pesukei zichronot, a remembrance of those verses of the zichronot, right? Of those things that we remember, whatever that means, and pesukei shofrot, and verses that have to do with blowing the shofar. Why? Liskor lachem, to remind us one very important thing. So if we talk about shofrot and zichronot, the remembrances and the blasts, well, what is it? What are you thinking about? What does that conjure up in your imagination? Thinking about the creation of the world, God just exploding the universe into action, the birth of man? No. It has to do with, he says, Liskor lechem ekedat Yitzchak. It's to remember the binding of Isaac. Shekarav tachtav ayil, because that he was not slaughtered, but instead this ram was slaughtered. And it's interesting because Yitzchak, out of all the patriarchs, at least for me, Mechila, I just don't relate to him at all. Like, I don't have a connection. Like, tell me to remember Yaakov and the struggle of his brother, Avraham overcoming his father and his family. I could relate to that, but Yitzchak, and there's not really much in the Torah about him. Like, he's a quiet guy. He's got an interesting life, and so much of it is really just a copy and paste of everything that Avraham did. And but there's not much there, except for this one thing called a Kedah. And it's really not about him. It's really about Avraham's struggle, more than it is about Yitzchak. Now, we know that when we talk about this Akedat Yitzchak, Chachamim tell us it happened on Rosh Hashanah. That's not an accident. The day that Abraham is going up, the day that he's about to be slaughtered, all of this is happening on Rosh Hashanah. So when we're in the Siddur and the Selichot and we're reading about Akedat Yitzchak, it's happening on this day itself. Now, it's complicated because when we think about the creation of the world, Torah tells us that this is the seventh month, right, of the calendar. And if you're talking about a new year, and I have to explain this today for this Con Edison group, but how do you have a new year that happens in the middle of the calendar? Like, shouldn't it be like month 1, day 1, not month 7, day 1? The new year, let's just change the calendar. Well, how does that happen over here? And it has to do with a little bit of machlok in the Gemara and Rosh Hashanah. Gemara tells us that there's two opinions as to when the world was formed. Based on Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, he says that the world was created in Tishrei, which would be Rosh Hashanah, and Rabbi Yeshua says it was created in Nisan, right? So Pesach, Nisan is the first of the year, right? And Rosh Hashanah is not. Well, why not? Why isn't it the other way around? Why isn't Rosh Hashanah month 1 and Nisan the other way around? So Tosfot tells us that truth is that Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Chaim. That Tishrei is the day that came into thought before, that God thought about creating the world, right? And Nisan is when it was where the creation wasn't actualized until Nisan. Meaning there's a thought, Rosh Hashanah, and the actualization, the physical manifestation of reality happens in the month of Nisan. And therefore we count based on what is tangible, not conceptual. I know that the month begins in a tangible kind of way. That is Nisan. The thought, the idea of the world starts in Tishrei. But what's interesting is that, and we see this by in the Machzor, we say Hayom Harat Olam. Today is the day that God conceptualizes the reality. Not Hayom Nolad HaOlam, Hayom Bara Olam. There's a conceptualization that we are reminded of that happens on Rosh Hashanah. Now, how does all of this translate into Yom Hadin, the day of judgment? The day where everything is decided. I get that. I get the story. I understand the beginning, the creation. Well, how does all of that translate into this terrifying experience of being judged by water and fire and coal and all kinds of very creative things that our rabbis share with us as far as living and dying, right? Well, how does the din part of this come into it? So The Gemara, there's actually so much on this, and we could just spend hours. I know you want to spend hours with me talking about this, so I'm going to try to condense this as quickly as I can. There's a midrash in Vayikra that says as follows, that Abraham says to God, if you want din, remember, Abraham represents chesed, kindness, din represents is judgment. Okay, din, the opposite of Abraham. Abraham says to God, if you want din, you cannot have a world. If you want a world, you cannot have din. So why do you pull at the rope from both ends? You want a world and you want din. You got to get low. You got to let go of one end. Abraham's saying that if you want to have a reality that is built on judgment, you cannot have a world. It doesn't exist. So which one do you want? Do you want a world or do you want judgment? Which one is more important? Because the only way reality as we have it can exist is through justice. And how do I see it? I see it every single day. All you have to do is open up any science book. The world as we know it should not exist. Everything should just be mush. The sun is 90 million miles away from planet Earth. So it takes 7 minutes for its rays to hit the planet, just enough so that there's water on the planet. Not too hot, not too cold, not a gas, not a solid, enough for it to heat the water, turning it into vapor. The earth is revolving, it's moving, it creates wind, it blows the vapor onto the earth, you have water, you have food, you have earth, everything is growing, it's amazing, it's perfect. On a molecular level, everything that is happening in your body is genius. DNA is like a photocopy machine. It's a machine that's constantly replicating every single part of your body over and over again perfectly. There's precision there. There's order there. There is justice there. There's din. Boundaries are necessary for a life of meaning. You can't have meaning in chaos. It doesn't work. The only way you could have a life of order, of meaning, is through order itself. But Abraham says, you want a world of justice, of din? That's nice. Then you can't have a world because the world does not work in justice. That's why he expresses chesed. The world is an expression of God's din, His justice. Today is a day that energy expresses itself in the world. Justice is here. And this is the paradox of justice. If justice wins, who loses? God loses. If He wants to create people who have the ability to choose, the ability to express the best of themselves, and if din wins, then all of that is gone. It doesn't work. Because we know we're flawed. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to fail. But God doesn't create a world of absolute justice. He understands that, right? God says, even though, right, Hashem loves, this is a pasuk in Yeshayahu, He says, even though God loves din, God says, I love justice. And the Zohar tells us that his love for His children triumphs over His love for din. That means today is the day where God expresses these two different parallel concepts. On the one hand, He says that the universe could only work through justice. You're here for a reason, purpose, meaning. It's organized. There's justice. But God's love for you, His desire to give to you, to provide for you, overcomes His own desire for justice. Isn't that profound? You think that our ancestors came to Beit Knesset trembling in fear because they were worried about getting zapped? That's not what was happening. You know what's worse than getting zapped? It's disappointing someone that you truly love. Think about that for a minute. What's the difference between walking into Rosh Hashanah thinking that there's going to be a king with a lightning bolt who's going to find some clever way of ending your time on this earth, versus someone who deeply loves you and cares for you, and you don't want to disappoint them? That's what's supposed to be happening. As we're walking and getting ready, we're 6 days away from Rosh Hashanah. A day where God says, I choose to ignore some of my rules to give you life. To give you the ability to choose to be great. So, what happens on this day? This day is a day that's fascinating and confusing at the same time. On the one hand, it's this conceptualization of reality, right? On the other hand, it's a day where God ignores part of His own system of justice to create a universe so that He can show you this deep love. Now, what other nation does this? This is the tour in Or Chaim. He says as follows. He said the accepted custom of one who faces judgment is to wear black. to wrap himself up in mourning, to neglect his hair, his fingernails, right? Because he has no idea what the result of judgment is going to be. You're going on a court case, you're going to prepare in a very, very terrifying way. But he says, not Yisrael. What do Jews do? Instead, they wear white. They wrap themselves in white. They groom their hair, their fingernails, they eat, they drink, they sing songs, it's Rosh Hashanah, right? Very different. If this was really a day of doom and gloom, then we're doing a really poor job at expressing it. So Rosh Hashanah is something much more profound. Well, why not the other way around? The Maharshal says, then why don't we wear embroidered and colorful clothing, right? Maybe that's what we should be doing, but we don't do it because that's too insensitive. There's a fine balance of expressing what this day is about. So, I'm going to tell you what I told this Con Edison group today. Okay, the Con Edison group. By the way, I got glowing reviews afterwards. That was really nice. They sent me like a feedback form. They're very organized over there, and I told them like this: at Rosh Hashanah, if you want to understand what Rosh Hashanah is, you have to appreciate what Jews think about time, how we understand time. We're not marching away from time, right? We believe in a cyclical view of time. But the most important question we have to ask ourselves is, what is our purpose? What are we doing here? This is the most important question you have to ask yourselves as you're walking into Rosh Hashanah. Why are you here? What is your unique mission? What is the function, the purpose of your life? Because every single person here has a unique story to tell. Every single person in this room has a unique set of circumstances that define who they are. Your parents, your family, your upbringing, education, the wealth, everything, your social circumstances, all of that is predetermined on some level. And all you have at the end of the year is really the ability to choose how you're going to respond with and in all those circumstances. That's all there is. Your choice. A simple choice. Do I do this or do I do that? Do I do this or do that? Am I making the right choice, the wrong choice? The hard choice, the easy choice? Am I growing? Am I standing still? Am I living a life of meaning, or am I choosing a life of superficiality? That's what this is. I had a young woman call me today, and she says to me, Rabbi, I don't know what to do. I really don't. I'm having a hard time with Rosh Hashanah this year. I don't want to say the same philot over and over again. I've been doing this for a long time already, for 30 years, and there are no new results for me. Like, why should I go to synagogue? Why should I go to synagogue? What am I going to do there? Why should I go there? This happened 2 hours ago, this conversation. So I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, I've tried everything already. I've gone to classes. I'm just not inspired. I don't want to go. I don't want to go to synagogue. I'm not married. I don't want to see all my friends and their married children. I don't want to deal with that stuff. I just want to be home. I don't want to do nothing. I'm like, so what are you asking? You're asking me like what? She's like, it's okay to stay home for you not to go to synagogue? Like, you think I'm going to tell you that? She's like, no. I'm like, well, so then what do you do? She's like, well, maybe you could help me figure this out. So I told her, I'm like, yeah, your problem isn't Rosh Hashanah. I said to her, your problem is that you don't believe in God. She's like, well, what do you mean? I said, well, do you believe that there's a God, and do you believe that God gave the Torah? She says, I think so. I'm like, you think so, or do you know so? Because there is no in-between so when we're having a conversation about something like your belief in God. Right? So she says, well, I know. Like, well, I said, okay, well, let's talk about it for a second. Like, do you believe that there's something that do you believe in hope? Do you believe that God cares and that He loves you? Because if you don't, then you're right. Don't go to synagogue. What are you doing there? You're wasting your time. But if you believe that there's a God, and you believe that He gave the Torah, He communicated with humanity, and you believe that that's all true, how could you not want to be in synagogue on Rosh Hashanah? You have an opportunity of standing before a melech on the day of din, of judgment, the day where He ignores His rules because He loves you. That's what you want to miss out on? Are you nuts? Go to synagogue. Figure it out. But don't call me and tell me that it's not working. Because, it's been a short time. And I know we all want instant results. I want to feel it. I want to see it. It's not fair. This person, we're always comparing and contrasting. Forget about the world around you for a moment. Because you know what's going to happen? 10 days from Rosh Hashanah, God's going to forget everything that happened also. Something called Yom Kippur. Everything is erased. Slachti, you're forgiven, over. Your past does not define who you are. You know what defines who you are? Your choices, right now. What are you doing to prepare for Rosh Hashanah? Are you going to just show up and stumble into the synagogue, allow the chazan to lead, and not really spend any time understanding the words again? Another year? Did you go out and buy yourself another book that you didn't read in preparation for Rosh Hashanah? Did you find yourself a good translation and spend some time preparing the parts that are the most meaningful to you so that it's meaningful when you're standing there with your community and singing and praying on Rosh Hashanah? Because that's what this is about. This is a unique opportunity. I truly believe, my whole heart, that those 48 hours are the most profound moments in our lives. It's not about being forgiven. That's what Yom Kippur is about. But Rosh Hashanah is about our mission statement. Are you going to give up hope? Do you believe that there's more within you to give? Because if you're here right now, you're part of a small group of inspired people. You're the inspired people. The people who feel like they're struggling in this room are the inspired group of people. You're here, you made it. Amazing. But I don't feel that way, Rabbi. I can't tell you how to feel. I can only remind you that if you don't recognize your value and your importance, you're missing out on the beauty of Rosh Hashanah. God did not have to create man. He's perfect, flawless, needs nothing. You're here because there's a being that is in love with you. You're here because you have something unique that you need to finish in this world, and only you can do it. I believe that wholeheartedly. And Rosh Hashanah is the day where we spend time reminding ourselves that I am here because there is a God that loves me, that He breaks His own rules for me, that if I was living under the microscope of din, I would have been zapped a long time ago, but if I'm still here, I got something to do. He still believes in me. He still believes in you. Rav Wolbe says this so beautifully. He says, every person needs to know that he has importance, not an imagined importance, right? That he considers himself special, but rather a deeply profound importance that is even shocking. Gemara says that every single person has to declare, Bishvili nivra ha'olam, the world was created for me. And Rashi says over there that this means that I am considered as important as the entire world. Do you understand that? That if you're here, you are just as important as the whole entire planet that you are sitting on. Like the entire world, he says, this is the one life experience of a particular person. There was never a person like him. There will never be or ever be a person like them again throughout history. There's no other you ever. Yes, even if you are into the regression therapy sessions, this you version of you right here and right now is the only you that could ever be. There's all those nuances of everything else before, but you're here, you're unique. There's nothing else like you. With special character and strength, child of my parents, born in a specific time and period, all those things, the environment, that is you. You are unique and you have a special role to play. And if you don't allow Rosh Hashanah to jolt you back into feeling that responsibility of being the best you're missing out. You're missing out. You see, because there are two kinds of people. One of the things that Chazak started doing as campus is open is we started teaching some classes on campus, and it happens to be that I'm teaching at Baruch. And I walk into this club today, and you have the only reason why any college student is going to a Torah class is because they want free something, right? So, they're giving out free falafel today. So, people are there. I was told, though, that on vegetarian days, there's generally less people that come, but when you serve meat like that, like quadruples the amount of people that show up for classes. So today was a vegetarian. There was a small group of 25 people that showed up. And there's two kinds of kids in that room. The kid that accidentally walked into a class, but is curious, and the other kid who just really wants to eat their falafel and walk out of the room. And it's so, you could see it on their faces. I wish I could video record them. It's hilarious, There are two kinds of people that are in this room tonight. They're the kind of people that just want to say, well, I went to the shiur tonight, check. I went to the class, I heard some divrei Torah, I did my thing, check, I'm good. There's another kind of person tonight that's going to walk away, like this young couple that I started with, okay, who are desperately looking to connect to God in the most intimate way. Every day is meaningful for them because they live a life of purpose. It's clear to them why they're here. They understand the mission. But when you're born with it and it becomes this repetitive thing over and over again, maybe we lose it. It's hard to feel it. But we blow the shofar to remind ourselves of the most important thing. Yitzchak Avinu was ready to give up everything for his beliefs. He was ready to sacrifice himself for his beliefs. We remember Yitzchak because of his total commitment. He was 100% in. You don't feel like you're 100% in? Rosh Hashanah is a time where we blow the shofar, that primal scream. If you want to feel it, I can't find words, God, to express my desire to be connected, but I'm blowing the shofar as a cry, as a scream, as a holler. I want to be woken up. I want to do what I need to do in this world. I want to be there. And I'm confident if you just open your hearts a little bit, if you're stuck, you're feeling like you're not going to find that connection, don't give up hope. If you're here, it's because you have so much more to do. The world is beautiful. There's infinite possibilities. Don't allow your poor imagination to get in the way of everything that's awesome that's still waiting to come to you in this world. Rosh Hashanah is 6 days away. You have 6 days to get yourselves ready for the most awesome experience in the world. It's only awesome if you prepare for it. My bracha to each of you is that you recognize that you are an infinite spark of God, that you have in you the potential to accomplish anything you set your mind to. And if you're here in a world that is so clouded with darkness and uncertainty, know that you have the spark and the ability to bring that light that we also desperately need to find our way and in making this world into something much more profound, deeper, better, and clearer for everybody. Shana Tova Metuka, everybody. Thank you.